This is Josh Friedman coming to you from Kigali, Rwanda, where after having spent 3 months without putting on one of these, actually not 3 months here, 3 months mostly in Tanzania, but after 3 months of going without a jacket, I finally had to add a layer. And that's because Rwanda is very much a mountainous country. Even though it's along the equator, there is a climate here that is not quite as warm as much of the other tropical African areas that surround this place. And that is part of the reason why I'm going to discuss a little bit of some comparisons between Rwanda and Bosnia and between Kigali and Sarajevo. Now, up front, I'll say that this area of Kigali it's kind of a suburb. It's still very much in the city, but it's definitely not the city center. As you can see from some of the houses right here, it does not have a very modern feel, yet Kigali, at least compared to most other African cities, does have a very modern feel. More on that in a moment. Now, there have been quite a few comparisons drawn between Bosnia and Rwanda, not so much over the look and feel, but over the events of the 1990s. In the year 1994, there was, as famously is known, there was a genocide that took place here. Somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million. The figure's it varies. A lot of people have thrown out the figure 800,000. Well, anyway, between 500,000 and 1 million Tutsis and also some moderate Hutus were killed by the Hutu authorities and by a lot of civilians or just citizens who are Hutus who are going along to get along. And that came at the conclusion of the civil war here in Rwanda that was taking place in the early 1990s, and this was all taking place pretty much simultaneous with the Bosnian War, which spanned pretty much 92 through 96. And in Bosnia, in Srebrenica in 1995, there was a mass murder that some people in some countries as well have deemed to be genocide. And likewise, not only was there this mass murder that some people describe as genocide in Bosnia, but it happened in a sense because of a complete failure of the United Nations. Srebrenica was this UN safe zone or UN compound where people were supposed to be protected by Dutch UN troops, and that didn't happen. The UN troops bailed and the massacre unfolded. Now, there are a lot of arguments to be made about why the massacre in Srebrenica unfolded, and I'm not going into this now. Likewise, in Rwanda, there were UN troops here, and they bailed during the genocide. And so, as you can see, for a variety of reasons, timing, the involvement of the UN or lack thereof, the ethnic nature, in Bosnia, it was not just Serbs and Bosnian Muslims or Bosniaks, but also Croats involved, and they all pretty much speak the same language in a very their cultures are very similar, yet there's a cultural divide based on religion, and because of that there is an ethnic divide between the groups here. And here in Rwanda, they're the Hutus and the Tutsis, and a lot of people say that they're really the same people, but over the course of the 20th century, in part due to colonial rule, there was a divide with Hutus, the majority being the poorer class and the Tutsis being the more upper class, and there were clashes and problems over the course of the second half of the 20th century, which I'm not getting into now. But anyway, so there was the ethnic divide here in Rwanda, the ethnic divide here in Bosnia in the 1990s. The tensions inflamed, they boiled over into war and genocide here, and arguably genocide there. Although I would say that in drawing comparisons between the Rwandan genocide and the war in Bosnia and the ethnic cleansing that was going on, especially like what I saw at the Kigali Genocide Memorial here, and probably elsewhere in papers and publications and news reports and whatnot, I would say there is a lot of exaggeration of what happened in Bosnia. If you take Srebrenica, for example, about 8,000 people were killed there, whereas upwards of 1 million were killed here. And in Srebrenica, I'd also point out that the women and children were separated from the men and boys to some extent, and the women and children were spared, whereas here that was not the case. The women and children were being butchered in the streets with machetes. So the comparisons, the compare and contrast could go on and on and on, and I don't want to really delve deep into this. Maybe in the future, maybe if I return here, maybe when I'm back in the Balkans, I don't know. Maybe if you want to hear more about this, maybe I'll be doing some more compare and contrast of what happened in the 90s here and what happened in the 90s in the Balkans and Bosnia in particular. But I would like to put out on a lighter note is that it just looks and kind of feels like Bosnia being here in Kigali. So, as I was saying in the beginning, Rwanda is very much mountainous, and you can see green hills everywhere. That looks a lot like Bosnia. On the drive into here, coming to Kigali from Tanzania, I kind of felt like I was in Bosnia. We're going up and down these green mountains and green hillsides. And as you can see, it is very overcast here. It's definitely warmer here than in Bosnia because we're down by the equator, but it's, as I was saying, it's not that warm here. I need to put on this jacket quite often. There's a lot of rain. Almost always there seems to be cloudy sky, or at least overcast for a large part of the day. And it's kind of got a little bit of that eerie feeling that sometimes I attribute to Sarajevo based on the weather and the scenery and the remains of what is left from the war. But at the same time, I would also say, and I'm going to crop in some footage because you can't see it here, but Sarajevo and Kigali look similar, not just in the sense that they're cities with hills, although I would contrast them in the sense that in Kigali, the modern development is very much on hilltops, whereas in Sarajevo, the modern development is basically along the river, at the bottom of the valley, in the flats, if you could call it that. But that brings up the point that both Kigali and Sarajevo have very much been rebuilt since the conflicts. Probably Kigali much more strikingly, which I'll get into, I think, in an upcoming video. Kigali and Rwanda have developed incredibly since they were on the brink of, I don't know, nothing being left in 1994. But both here in Kigali and in Sarajevo, there's been post-war construction, and there are modern buildings, some skyscrapers, or at least a little bit of a skyline. There, it's basically condensed along the river. Here, it's spread out on different hilltops. But yeah, even war, genocide, mass murder, that all aside, it just looks and feels kind of similar. Both Bosnia and Rwanda and Kigali and Sarajevo. It's overcast. It's cool. It's cooler than surrounding areas. It's more mountainous than surrounding areas. And yeah, if you take a look at some of the graves and sites and memorials, then they both have a bit of an eerie feeling because of the events of the 1990s. So I just thought I'd make this little comparison. I didn't want to get into depth about the conflicts there and here. If you want to hear more about that, we could get into that more in the future, but for now, thank you very much for watching. As they say here in Rwanda, Markozi Chani, and I hope to be bringing you a little bit more from my brief stay here in Kigali. Goodbye for now.